Are we having a party here? I don't know.
Welcome to Polishing Profits. Join our 3 industry experts boasting 140 years of experience as they unlock building service contracting secrets that can revolutionize your business.
Well, welcome to Polishing Profits. This is the point in time that I always have to figure out what it is I'm going to say based on the notes. So in case you're interested, this is going to be an ad. Good luck. Ed, say something. Don't just wave today. What's on your mind? One thing, 1 second.
No, nobody wants to know what's on my mind. So let me just say greetings and salutations, okay?
Hail Caesar. Okay, Sharon, anything on your mind for the good of the order before we begin this?
Mine's a little more cleaned up than Ed's.
Okay.
I'm guessing. I don't know.
That's too bad, but go ahead.
I'm happy to be here. It's another exciting podcast day. It's beautiful outside, a little chill in the air, which is great for we Floridians. Happy to be here. Can't wait to share our information.
Well, I'm happy to be above ground, and as long as we're given a weather report, it's 43 and raining in Washington State.
Oh, sorry about that.
You learn to live with it.
Not
So
really.
what are we talking about? Everybody's waited. We've built all that anticipation BS in here, so I think I can use BS, and yeah, we're on cable. All right. Use of subcontractors versus W-2 employees. The war continues to wage on as we move into the future. What do you do with them? How do you use them? When is it good? When is it bad? Should I be all one, all the other? What are the rules? What's the IRS going to do? What's the state going to do? Oh, my goodness. It is just fraught with rocks in the river. But we're here to tell you where the rocks are in the river, at least according to our perspective. So I'm going to cheat my check notes here. And the first point, use of subcontractors versus W-2 employees. Oh, the horror of it all. How does it work? Okay, we're going to start off with our first point on impact on growth and scaling using contractors versus W-2s. And Ed, since you're all smiles and you're really an SME in this area, set us off. No, that's not a good word. Get us going.
Yeah. The whole thing with the subcontractors, if you're hoping to deal with professional property management folks, okay, their feel on this is, what are you here for? Why am I doing business with you? I don't need you.
Now, just give a little of your thinking behind that. There's a reason you said that. So.
Yeah, well, no, they understand that there's limited supervisory capabilities. They're not stupid. They do understand. So you're going to be relegated to either B and C accounts or government. Government would be the exception. There is quite a bit of contracting that goes on in the government sector. And it's all good. It's all okay. But as far as any kind of a long-term growth strategy, it's not a good way to go. Because very simply, the business owner is not in control of operations. Simple as that, and it's like, well, what do we need you for? Why are you here?
Well, that's true. Okay, Sharon, what's your perspective on that?
Very similar. I think it has a place perhaps early on in a small business when a small business is needing to add floor care, carpet care, window cleaning. Those kinds of things may not be trained specifically and properly in those areas. And that would be the time when you bring on a qualified, experienced subcontractor that would help you with the floor work. And I did that early on until I had enough work to have my own floor crews and could train them and I had the equipment. That plus there's another huge aspect of this. And one of the things we talk about growth of a company is the culture that's developed in the company. And it's very difficult to develop culture when you have subcontractors. It's next to impossible. You have no culture of the company. It's like Ed said, what are you doing here? What is your purpose? And if your purpose is to grow a company that has some power, some strength, some sustainability, you need culture to get and keep those employees. And that doesn't happen when you have subcontractors. They're all just working independently. And there's a lot that you can't do, which we're going to get into in a later episode. It will hamper your long-term, bigger company growth.
Now, I'm somewhere in the middle, and since I've been doing more and more consulting these last 8 to 10 years, I do know and well, obviously at this point, not at liberty to say, but I've got some ideas of who we might want to talk to. I know at least 3 companies that are high 7 figures and in the eights, and they're primarily subcontract. Now, I don't know the secret sauce and how or why it all works, but I do know it works and they've been able to maintain it. So it would be interesting to get their perspective. It does definitely work for some people. I know 2 of them really well, that they are limited in the size and type of accounts they can get. So it does limit in some cases. I also know somebody, and I don't know how they're doing very well on a larger scale. But from my own practical experience, I used a hybrid model my whole life. We also had a franchising system, we had subcontractors, and they played, and I talked about this in a couple of group panels I've been on. You almost have to have what I call a hybrid approach anymore. You have to have some subs that will help you out when employees quit, no shows or whatever, things like that. You can figure out what tactic you want to use for that. So they serve a good purpose there. They serve a good purpose for, one-off stuff or satellite work you're doing. They can help support you there. And particularly since there's been a labor market change. We had affiliate partners, but we didn't touch windows. We didn't do pressure washing. We did it, but we did it all through what we called affiliated partnerships. And they were regular businesses that specialized in that. And we used them particularly for that purpose. So basically a prime to a sub or a GC to a contractor, whichever definition works for you. So I know the accounts that we had would, when you get into clean rooms and 1,000,000 square foot accounts, there's an exception to every rule. But if somebody has one, we'd love to have you on and talk about it. I wouldn't want you to give your secret sauce away. But they just didn't allow it. The campuses, the sanitation, the medical, they just didn't want any part of it, back to what you guys said. But we did use them and employ them to help build a successful business. Ed, you're nodding there, so you're thinking, so what's going on?
Well, 2 things. One is just a little bit of history. Back not very long ago, this was the holy grail in the cleaning industry, was how do we get out of paying workers' comp and the taxes? And that's essentially what it was. And the way it worked was people would have this bright idea that, well, we're just going to 1099 everybody. And it would work for sometimes as long as 2 or 3 years. Okay. But then the IRS would walk in and completely disassemble a company over that. Okay. So what happened was the subcontracting thing was always part of the retail world. Okay. It was always part of the retail world because you had such large areas, there's national banks, they're in 48 states. Okay. So some of these things, but what really got it going was central purchasing. When central purchasing became pretty standard with most good-sized companies, that was the time when there was some great opportunities. But let me give you an example. One of my favorite ones when it comes to the subcontracting thing was, as a young man, I was at a BSCAI conference. And I was smart enough when I was young to keep my mouth shut and listen. And I overheard a great conversation. It was, oh, old Jim Kavanaugh down Dallas? Oh, yeah, old Jim. How's Jim doing? Okay. Well, Jim done figured out that whole subcontractor thing. He calls them franchisees.
Well, you are going back on a history lesson.
That's essentially all everybody was trying to do, was somehow to get out of the insurance and tax thing. All right. It just didn't work. When central purchasing, it was funny. I was doing an account and I had a manager and he had done the same building. And it was the same account, but the same exact building on his own. And he said, you got to understand how, when I had this contract, Friday afternoon, I'd show up. There's a little tiny window there and somebody would stick their hand out the window and hand me $1,200 in cash. Those days are long gone. So that's just a little bit of the history. My own situation was I had a very standard traditional cleaning service where there was an actual organization. And after I sold my company, I went to work. I stayed in the business and I went to work for a very big company that only subcontracted. And these were not little people. I mean, they were up around $150 million a year. Okay. But it was all retail.
So we're limiting, it's a customer mix that really accepts that and some that don't. And there's some people in between, but a lot of that came from that whole growth. I remember that boom in the retail.
When I went back to people I had done business with previously, and listen, I had a habit of not lying to people. So, I told them flat out what was going on. And I mean, there was just no way they were going to even think about doing anything like that. That is crazy. But I dealt with essentially professional property and facility managers. And their feeling pretty much was this is a complete loser.
Yeah. I think what
Sharon, how
happens
about
is
you? What's your way in here?
I liken it to a dispatch company. Okay. You become the central dispatch, and your organization as such and your company disappears because what you are doing is shuffling people and filling jobs. That's what you're doing. You're not having camaraderie. You're not having company meetings. You're not having company gatherings. There's no spirit of teamwork. You're every man for himself, every man or woman for themselves.
Mhm.
And the company, I just envision a woman or a man sitting behind this microphone speaker that is sending out the dispatch orders. You go here today, you go here, and this one's covering this and this. There is no company. You're just filling jobs. And a lot of times that's all we're doing anyway. Hopefully there is some team spirit and some camaraderie and the feeling of togetherness, all working toward the same goal. When you have a company, you have that sense of belonging, and you don't have it with totally 100% W.
No, that relationship, to your point, is different. I know with the key ones that we had, they're two companies working together to deliver a number of different services to one customer, so they have one point of contact. So, and people are very accepting of that when you get into the specialty services.
Right.
You're right, because you can't have the culture. We will get into this in another episode, not in depth, but the IRS and the states and everybody with insurances and payroll taxes, and we can go on FICA, SUDA, FUTA. They all have their governing rules, and if you get too involved, all of a sudden the switch is flipped from employee or from sub or IC, independent contractors. I'm not sure there's really any difference. This independent contractor, that seems to be the 1099 people from the lingo I listen to. And the subs are more, they actually have an LLC or a company you're working with. So that could probably change. But yeah, you're right. You can't build that sort of culture, and you do give up a fair amount of control and direction. You use the dispatcher. I've been involved in the construction industry, not big time, but I've done enough of it. I look at it as a GC and sub. A general contractor builds your entire house or your entire commercial building, but they don't employ all those people. They hire electricians, they hire plumbers, they hire framers. I can go on down through the whole thing. And
Right.
they are part, it's like when people do a movie, they get a whole bunch of pieces together, and you may never do a movie together again, but they win Academy Awards because they bring all the right people in the group. So again, it's one person bringing a collective together to get something done. And it works very well in the construction industry. How far you can take it here? Well, it said somebody had $180 million worth of business. So let's throw this out. So what's right for people listening to this? And I think we have probably 2 or 3 kinds of listeners. We've got people who are doing it successfully at whatever revenue. We've got people probably in my boat somewhat. I used a hybrid model. We have people using them as professional subs, and we have some people just starting out. And I know we've spoken a little bit, but them being the sub or the IC, the secondary contractor, might be a good way to start business. So with those put out on the table, let's talk about those different scenarios and what is right and wrong when you're looking to scale your business. I've got $1 million. I've used a hybrid model. I'm doing a little bit of both. What's the best way to go? And there's no right or wrong answer. We're just, again, roundtable. Thought, Ed?
Yeah, what we've seen is that the major players are no longer describing themselves as janitorial or cleaning companies. They are maintenance management companies. And, by changing that, it opens it up to where it'll make some sense. The first company that I worked for that did that, and I was astounded But I had this great experience. We're walking into this company, and the first half hour was going to be my introduction to the company. And this fellow from New York with this gold chain, told me with a big smile that we're a $150 million cleaning company and we do not own a vacuum cleaner. And it was like, whoa, how does that work? And that's where I found it. Now, let me tell you, the rest of the story is I had my 30-minute introduction. Okay. And that was my onboarding was 30 minutes. Because I've been doing this for years. I didn't need a whole lot of onboarding, but there was about a 30-minute onboarding thing. But the entire rest of the day was these guys going, oh my God, we're going to lose this one. Oh my God, we're going to lose out. Wait a minute. It's Juan. It's Juan's fault. Juan. And it's like, well, number one, you gave Juan $1 million worth of business. Okay. So that's mistake number one. Okay. And, I immediately figured out, I said, no, wait a minute, let me understand this. Okay. I get paid a commission to go sell an account that then we turn over to Juan to lose. So how does that work with my commission? Well, your commission's over, And it's like, wait a minute, this is not sounding like an awful lot of fun. And the problem was the people that were involved had no idea what to do. They were not capable of running a cleaning service. And that's an awful lot of the subcontracting world. It's people that do not have the ability, okay, they do not have the operational capability to build an organization. They just don't do it. And that's really one of the key things. Okay. If you're not able to build an organization, I'm sorry, you're never going to be a big company. It's just not going to happen.
No, true that. No argument there. Sharon?
No, I totally agree. Absolutely agree. And I think one of the things about Juan losing the account is that training Juan becomes prohibited. And so you have to depend on what Juan comes to the job with, or anybody else for that.
Now we get into vetting. Vetting who
and that's
you
going to
hire.
be a whole different topic for the next time. But it's a very precarious tightrope to walk. I think it has its place. And I too ran hybrid for a while, a very short period of time. I just felt that my clientele and my customers, those who trusted me, trusted in my instincts and in the organization that I had built, they too could go out and hire all kinds of subcontractors themselves. And again, to Ed's point, what do they need me for? I'm the middleman. So for me, I'm not a fan. I think it has its place in certain situations, such as the government contracting. It works okay. And early on when you're building your business. But as you're scaling and growing, issues with the effectiveness of having people that you can't manage.
The number one reason why people change cleaning services is lack of supervision. With going into starting a company with strictly that, look, all I'm going to do is go sell the accounts and then I'm going to turn them over to subcontractors, you're only going to get so far.
Scrub down a recap of what was covered on today's episode.
As we're wrapping this up, I think there's a lot here for our audience to take into consideration. And there's definitely, when you talked about it, one point I want to add in closing is, you talked about the more sophisticated buyer. When you're buying a national, and you worked a lot in the national arena, and I've worked with people who work in that arena, that's a different game. And they're group buying and they're bundling up, $3 million, $4 million worth of business from New York to Seattle and from, northern Michigan all the way down to the tip of California, Florida, till it's the side of the coast I live on. It's tough doing that. Even ABM uses subcontractors in, Horseback, Idaho, or Montana, or wherever it is. So they do. We'll talk more about places and vetting in our next one. But the real sophisticated, and I don't look, and I could be wrong, I didn't do it. Those are national buyers, and that's all, it's all about price. I know enough people that play in that arena that it's all about price and a little bit about service. There's a reason that the CBREs of the world and the JLLs are all in business to driving the cost down and getting the most in with all the different subs that they use. And you talk, those are O&M subs. Those are operational maintenance people. They sub the whole darn thing. very little self-performed. So it gets down to, but some of the buildings, all my customers would not accept subcontract work. Clean rooms wouldn't have any, large campuses would not have anything to do with it. Sanitation plants, hotel, motels, even a lot of the medical we did, it was written, the larger contracts no, you can't do that for the very reasons we're talking about. So you have to look at who's your market, who do you want to sell to, and what kind of jobs do you want. And I think the sophistication of the buyer, their intent, what they want, and then the ability to make sure that they can hold whoever has that contract completely accountable comes into play on the larger ones. I won't say it doesn't happen. I'm not the guru on the top of the hill, but my 40 years of experience does lend itself to some of that, and they do make exceptions. So I think with all that said, we're going to look into some vetting, use for special services, and all of that in our next episode. So for some more riveting, exciting, I was going to say the bad word, information from the Polishing Podcast, folks. We'll see you all in the next one. Adios. Have a good day. Cheers.
Bye.